Good morning and welcome back to the Collective Church NW Experience. I am where I am today because one, it's the summer and it's hot and being outside sounds painful. And two, it's summer and all of my kids are at home more. So finding quiet places is a little bit more of a challenge. So sit down Chuck is going to be hanging out today. And so we're looking at James 4, verses 11 through 12. And the first thing I need to make sure that you know is that I have a hard time reading the Bible when it speaks personally to me. So I know that the way that it's supposed to be is when it speaks personally to me, then that is like powerful. And that's true. But it's also stinging and not fun a lot of the times. And so when I'm looking at James 4 verses 11 and 12, I broke up some so we could just focus on these two verses. And it's because the way that I use, and there's actually been portions of James already that is kind of talking about the way that we speak. But this part right here actually goes a little bit deeper into that. So verses, I'm going to read it, and then I just want to kind of tell you a little bit of like personal parts, and then of what this means to me, and then we'll kind of go on. But James 4, 11 through 12. So we've just come off verses 7, 8, 9, and 10 that say this: Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And we talked about the last time how hard that is to know. Like, what does that mean that he will flee from you? Like, literally, if you resist the devil, is he gonna be gone? Like, it's kind of hard to kind of wrap your brain around that. Verses 8, which is one of my favorite places in the Bible: Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts and double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. So this is what we have going into verse 11. Then it says, Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The judge who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Initially, this reads like some kind of a tongue twister, or like Dr. Seuss book, when it's like, the one who speaks against a brother judges his brother, speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge. Like, it's kind of like, it's kind of like a doctor, like Cat in the Hat type thing, like the way that it just kind of reads and uses the same word over and over and over. But do not speak evil against one another, brothers. So here's the problem with that for me. The challenge for that with me is speaking evil over someone is very comforting at times for me. It's very cathartic. When I feel like I've been wronged, or if I feel like I have been treated poorly, or if I felt like I have been disrespected, then instead of a physical altercation where I may not handle myself well, not like a fight, but like verbal altercation, or confronting it, or like going to someone where I know that I may not handle it great, the next step for me is, well, what if I just spoke poorly of them? What if I just made sure people knew how much I didn't like them? What if I just made sure I said things that casted those people in a really poor light? That comes easy to me. As wrong as it is, that comes very easy to me. My defensive nature of making sure that if I feel wronged, that I make sure that other people are able to see what I've seen. Now, not 100% of the time. I don't do this every day. I don't do this 7 days out of the week. But when I feel a deep hurt or pain, I tend to use my speech. And according to this, I speak evil over others. So this idea of speaking evil, it's weird because when you look at what the picture actually was, there's this Greek word. I don't even know how to say it. It starts with a K. I'm not going to even try. Okay, it's just not. It doesn't matter that you know how to say it. But what speaking evil means is this: the sin of the. Okay, so just hang with me here. The sin. This is such weird. Okay, I know that I've like started and stopped 7 times, but it's funny. Like when you look at the picture of a word, or when you look at the meaning of a word, often it's just like it means this. Speak evil means da da da, done. This word means the sin of those who meet in corners and gather in little groups and pass on confidential information which destroy the good name of those who are not there to defend themselves. Now that is like the War and Peace version of a definition, but let me read that to you again. So when it says do not speak evil against one another, brother, the picture of the meaning is what I'm about to read you. The sin of those who meet in corners and gather in little groups and pass on confidential information which destroy the good name of those who are not there to defend themselves. Now, if you're like, well, they have no good name, like their whole name is bad. Well, that's not true. Like people that are like this, for me, they're not totally evil, horrific people, but when I speak of them, I realize that I kind of feel like I'm off in a corner with people and I'm just eviscerating people verbally about things that have hurt me, and they are not there to defend themselves. So there's a one-sided conversation that is just spewing toxicity about someone else. So that's the idea there, kind of in this own little corner. So let me read that to you again. Do not speak evil. Do not do that thing against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge. This idea there is that, look, the judge that is talking about here, it's like you are now taking on a position that is meant for God. Because, there are a lot of verses about keeping people accountable and things like that and all that kind of stuff. It's not talking about that type. What it's talking about is you are taking on a role that you are not built for. Not just that you didn't get voted in for. You are taking on a role that you were literally not built for. You are taking on a role that was built for a perfect created God with the ability to be all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present. He is built for that role. And you are not. Because earlier in James, it says, James 2:8 says, love your neighbor. Okay? So this idea that speaking evil against God's law. So you're speaking evil against someone in a way that you don't have. Now, not that God speaks evil against them, but I'm saying God is the one who is able to be set up as a judge. So when we do something that takes on the role of a judge, a lot of these commentaries, what they're saying is that you were speaking evil against God's law. And so if you're speaking evil against God's law, you're speaking evil against God. Therefore, you're speaking evil against your neighbor. And so when you think about this, I don't know that in these commentaries and these resources, it's not like we're setting out to try to sin. It's not like we're trying to set out to be a horrible person. But what's happening is we are forgetting our identity. We are forgetting that we are not God. That if that is a role set aside in something He was built for, that is not our identity. And we need to stop trying to take over God's identity. When in Romans 14, it says, let us not pass judgment. Okay? And the idea in Romans 14, I was listening to a podcast of a friend of mine over on the East Coast, and he was saying that in the Romans 14, when it says, let us not pass judgment, the idea is if you engage, it has to be with what they called brotherly love. So if you engage, let us not pass judgment, the idea is if you engage, you have to be able to do it in brotherly love. That in the engagement, in the confrontation, at the core reason that you are doing what you're doing is not lying or just, oh, no, this was out of love, and yet really it was just a creative way for you to get at someone. That at the core that you have to engage it in brotherly love. So that's Romans 14. And then you get to here, and do not speak evil against another. And it talks about the one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. That you are not identifying who you are supposed to be. You are not the lawgiver. You are not the judge. You are forgetting your identity. You are trying to take over God's identity. You're breaking the law to love one another. James 2:8 already talked about like loving your neighbor. So as we look at this and move on, I just want to tell you that it is hard for me, not because I don't believe what is being said. It's hard for me because I do this. And don't think about it when I'm doing it. It feels justified to be able to defend yourself and to speak something over someone else in anger when you've been hurt. And I tend to be good with my words when it comes to speaking evil over someone else. My sarcasm tends to be biting. And you know, they always say that like all sarcasm, there's a hint of truth. Now, that's not a scientific data. I don't know if that's true. I will say this, that I know that in the times in my life when I have spoken evil against someone else, when I have brought toxicity and spoken over them and have not only like trying to keep them accountable, that's not what I'm talking about, but I have taken on the role of God that I'm going to judge that person. I see that in my words that there's hurt and pain that I've not dealt with, and honestly don't know how to deal with in that context, and find ways to make myself feel better by saying those things. So what I don't believe it's saying is I don't believe that it's talking about the fact like if we need to tell the truth about something to protect someone, if you're not trying to judge someone, if you're trying just to make sure that there's a level of protection, that you are sharing things that need to be known, there's a tension there, and there's a grayness there, and there's a fine line there of knowing when you've crossed over. And honestly, I don't always know where that line is. So it's not like there's a formula I feel like I can give you. All I know is what it talks about in Romans 14, is if we are not to pass judgment, if we are able to talk about something and do it in a way that at the core has this foundational, this brotherly love, this connective love that is at the core of what I'm sharing, and you can identify that, and the person that is hearing you can identify that, then I think that is a good evaluation of how you can move forward and not try to take on the role of God as judge. I just don't have that in me a lot. I just really realize that my words, I can just be a jerk. And I know that there's been times in my life where I've tried to confront those people to repair, and so I don't even have to worry about that anymore. There are other times where it seems too painful to even do that, or seems impossible, so I haven't. And so I get in this cycle of just speaking evil against someone. I get in this cycle of meeting in a corner and gathering with a little group and passing on this confidential information, which destroy the good name of those who are not there to defend themselves. And as I do that, and as I think about it, it makes me wonder, like, okay, James is speaking to a group of people that have spread the church out and that are kind of all over, like they're scattered, they're spread apart, again, because of persecution, because of looking for a better life, because of not liking where they lived, and they decided to move out into some areas that were a little bit safer from attack. And you know, these churches were building, and people would start these churches, and they would expand out. And he begins to hear of all this stuff that is happening that is going against the intention of the church. And so he begins to write this letter, this epistle, to be able to change behavior, to identify and evaluate what needs to change so the church can be what the church was intended to be. And then James gets done talking about worldliness. He gets done talking about submitting yourselves, resisting the devil, like preparing your heart, this purity of not a sexual purity about doing what you can to strive for righteousness, to draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. And then verse 11 and 12 come in, and he says, "Do not speak evil against one another, brothers." What did he heard about what was happening in the early church? What was he hearing about the way that leaders of the church were talking about each other? What was he hearing about the way that people within the church were talking about and to each other? Did he hear about people that were like, I don't want to be a part of that because of the way that people were speaking evil over another? Did people come back and tell James that their firsthand experiences that they didn't feel connected to the church because of these words? Did he hear of couples and families and individuals? I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody knows what it looked like. But as James was sitting down and writing these words, I have to believe that he had some kind of a knowledge that what he was writing was to people who were struggling, at least somewhat, were struggling in this area of speaking evil over one another. So I want to read this to you one more time. And this part this morning is a little bit shorter than normal. It's only 2 verses. But I just want to be really transparent and say I've always struggled in this area. I've always struggled with my words, with passive aggressiveness, with sarcasm, with using humor and it being kind of biting. And I've also struggled with when people have hurt me or when I feel like people are disrespectful or don't honor me, that I go at them with my words. Verse 11, "Do not speak evil against one another, brothers." Don't allow yourself to get into those little groups and passing on this confidential information. And you're like, well, what's wrong with confidential information? Well, first off, what it goes on to say that this picture is, which destroy the good part of the name, the good name of those who are not even there to defend themselves. So you're not confronting them in brotherly love. You're not engaging them in brotherly love because you're not engaging them. You're just, for me, like looking for affirmation that what I'm saying is agreed upon by other people. And man, it feels really good when people agree with your stuff. When you're talking all this stuff and you were saying things and people agree to it, it feels amazing. And so it goes on to say, "The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge." Like, here's the deal. I am more of a doer of the law than I am the judge. Chuck, I'm more of a doer than the judge. Because it says in verse 12, there is only one lawgiver, God, and judge. He is judge. He who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Again, James is asking these questions, which it's great. I mean, I think that there's a curiosity there, but I also think that there's this, like, he knows, he's like, okay, who are you to really judge your neighbor? Like, who are you? Like, he's asking these questions that gives them a chance to be curious, but he's also asking these questions in an evaluatory way for them to go, oh, okay, like, who am I? If that's the standard, if God is the judge, if that's his identity, he was built for that identity. He was built to be the judge. I am not God. I am not built to be the judge. Therefore, who am I to judge your neighbor? Now, again, this is not talking about accountability or words that are trying to build up. This is what it's saying out of a commentary, that the criticism that what these words, that they were not intended for growth or welfare, but for self-justification and self-aggrandizement. Self-aggrandizement, I don't know, whatever. Making yourself look better. So this speaking evil was not intended to help someone in brotherly love be built up. It is meant for you to feel justified about what you're saying, you to feel justified about your actions, and you to make sure that you feel better and other people can come along and help you feel better. Man, that is literally one of the plot lines of my life. And I have tried to get better. And in so many ways, marriage, maturity, children, being married to a therapist, I've gotten so much better in these areas. But when I'm in pain and don't know what to do with my pain, and my wife is going to love that I just said that, I fall into this. and lose my identity and forget who I am and speak evil. And I, as part of the Collective Church NWA, as we look at this idea of judging our neighbor, just thinking about those that are around us, want us to be a church that we are aware if this is a part of who we are. We as individuals, as part of the church, that if this is something that we struggle with a lot, or if this is something we struggle with a little bit, that we are at least walking away from this, evaluating where we are and trying to put steps in that help us in this area. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. Doesn't mean you're not going to get angry and say things. It doesn't mean that there's not some things some truth that needs to be shared at times. But can we evaluate out of Romans 14 this idea, this core of brotherly love? James 2:8 earlier, looking at love your neighbor. And then James 4:11 and 12 are looking at do not speak evil against one another. And where is the line? Where you're speaking the truth in love, to where you're sharing hurts and pain, to where you're talking about something that you need to be able to confess and how that was handled and how that made you feel. I don't believe that any of those previous three things that you get into this judge category. But when you begin to speak evil over and destroy the good name of someone, and I think on purpose, people that you've not confronted, where there's no foundation of brotherly love, where you get together in little corners and you just spew toxicity, I feel like that is an area that we get to evaluate and go, is that us? How does that affect the church? How does that affect the individuals that are in the church? How does that affect people around me? And that we get to do it in such a way that we get to be asked the question, but who are you to judge your neighbor in this way? Not in an accountability way, but in this toxic speaking evil way. Man, trust me saying this is not because I like what it says to some degree, because it's hard for me to read. It's hard for me to live by a lot of times. It's not because I have it down. I'm telling you this because this is what Scripture says, not because I am a model of how this should be at all. So I hope that I can begin to evaluate even better, and I hope that the words that I say don't bring down anything that the collective church as a whole is trying to do. And I pray the same thing for us as the individuals. So listen, as you're going into your time today was a few minutes shorter. I hope that you get a chance to talk and to discuss to discuss in the chat. And July 11th is our next gathering. We're going to be at the Big Red Barn in Fayetteville. We're going to have a 4-man volleyball tournament. And don't worry if you don't like our 4-person volleyball tournament. You don't have to play. We'll have some other outdoor games there for fun. If the weather is not too hot, we're going to do s'mores. I'm just excited about us coming together and being a part. So July 11th at 5 p.m. Look at the email for more information. You guys have an incredible day. You guys have an incredible week. And thank you so much for being a part. And I can't wait to see what you guys are going to include in the chat. You guys have an incredible day.
You say just come to you, all who are weary, and you'll give me rest. you, all who are weary, and you'll give me rest. You say just lean